Welcome to this explainer. I am so glad you're here. Today, we're taking a journey from the absolute macro down to the incredibly micro to break down the human genome. We're going to keep it really simple and easy to understand. So, if you've ever wondered about the actual physical blueprint that makes you, well, you are in the perfect place. Let's make some sense of the amazing science happening inside your body right this very second.
Let's jump right in with a bit of a biological brain teaser. How exactly do you fit 2 whole meters of material into a space that is incredibly microscopic? We're talking 10 microns small. To put that in perspective, 10 microns is way smaller than anything the human eye can see. It's this wild physical paradox, practically an impossible packing problem.
Seriously, if you took all the DNA in just one single cell of your body and you stretched it all the way out end to end, it would measure a whopping 2 meters in length. Just picture that for a second. 2 meters of physical, coiled-up stuff somehow existing inside one tiny little cell. I know, it sounds like straight-up science fiction, but this is the literal reality of our biology.
Section 1. The ultimate packing problem. Fitting the code of life.
So how does the body pull this off? Well, the secret lies in a tiny structure called a nucleosome. You know how DNA naturally forms that classic coiled double helix shape? We've all seen those pictures. But to get small enough to fit inside a cell, that double helix physically wraps itself super tightly around these special proteins called histones. When the DNA and the histone protein lock together, they form this highly compacted structure, the nucleosome. By winding around these proteins over and over, the DNA just keeps compacting itself until it can perfectly squeeze into the tiny nucleus of your cell.
And it gets even more fascinating when your cells need to divide. During cell division, all that packed DNA organizes itself even further into tightly wound chromosomes. We have exactly 46 of these chromosomes, inheriting 23 from each of our parents. Winding up this tightly is really important because it guarantees that an exact, perfect copy of your DNA is made when those chromosomes separate. But here's the really cool part. When the cell isn't actively dividing, the DNA actually relaxes a bit. It stays condensed in the nucleus, but it loosens up just enough so your cells can easily read those genetic instructions.
Section 2. The DNA hierarchy explained, from macro to micro.
It helps to think of our DNA kind of like a set of nested boxes. The absolute biggest box is your genome, and it is massive, made up of 3 billion base pairs of DNA. If we open up that giant genome box and zoom in a level, we find your genes. Zoom in a bit closer, and those genes are made of strands of DNA. Finally, if we look at the tiniest, most foundational building blocks of that DNA, we find the individual nucleotides. So it goes: genome, genes, DNA, and then nucleotides.
Section 3. We are 199.9% identical. The unifying truth.
Okay, so your body uses roughly 20,000 genes to encode all the proteins needed to run your cells. But get this, those 20,000 crucial protein-coding genes make up less than 2% of your total genomic DNA. Isn't that wild? The vast majority of your genome, over 98% of it, is actually completely non-coding DNA.
But here is the truly incredible takeaway. When we look across that entire genome, all 3 billion base pairs, every single human being on this planet is 99.9% identical to one another. I mean, think about that next time you're walking down a busy street or sitting in a crowded room. Despite all the vastly different appearances, backgrounds, and personal traits we have, at the base code level, we are practically exactly the same.
Section 4. What makes you unique? The power of 0.1%.
Now, I know a 0.1% difference might sound mathematically tiny, almost insignificant, but remember, we are dealing with a genome of 3 billion base pairs. So that 0.1% actually translates to roughly 3 million differences across your overall genome. And out of those 3 million differences, about 20,000 land directly inside those super important protein-coding genes we just talked about. If you do the math, that averages out to about 1 difference per gene. It's exactly this tiny sliver of variability that makes you your own totally unique person.
Of course, these little changes in the DNA sequence don't just happen perfectly evenly. They aren't uniformly distributed across your genome. Whenever there's a difference in the DNA sequence at a specific spot, scientists simply call that a variant. And let's quickly clear up some of the jargon here, because this is where things can get a little confusing for folks. First, you have an SNV, or a single nucleotide variant.
That just means a variation is happening at one single position in the DNA code. Then you have an SNP, or single nucleotide polymorphism. An SNP is literally just an SNV that happens in more than 1% of the population. So basically, if a single nucleotide variant becomes common enough to show up in at least 1 in 100 people, it gets promoted to an SNP. Simple as that.
But SNPs aren't the whole story. Along with those single-letter swaps, our genetic code can also have deletions, duplications, and bigger rearrangements. All of these different types of changes team up at the individual level to create our personal uniqueness, all while sitting safely inside that overarching 99.9% similarity.
Section 5. Why your genetics matter. Real-world impact. So why does all this matter to us? Well, understanding this exact concept, that we are 99.9% identical, but that tiny 0.1% creates variations through SNPs and other changes, is absolutely foundational for modern biology. It's how we decode heritability, meaning why we inherit certain eye colors or traits from our parents. It's how we track and understand complex disease processes that affect millions of people worldwide. It literally explains who we are.
As researchers will tell you time and time again, this knowledge is absolutely crucial in modern medicine. Every single time we develop a new targeted therapy or try to figure out why a certain illness affects one family but not another, we're relying on this exact science. We are looking directly at the power of that 0.1% variability.
I want to leave you with this one thought. We have somehow managed to map out all 3 billion base pairs of human DNA. We understand how 2 entire meters of material coils around histone proteins just to fit inside a microscopic 10-micron space. So if just 0.1% of our incredibly compressed, highly organized DNA holds the absolute key to human disease, heritability, and our own personal individuality, what on earth will modern medicine discover next? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. I really hope you found it as fascinating as I do.